Balance Druids use the power of nature, Elune, and the moon to bring down the stars upon our enemies. And I'm going to show you everything that you need to know to hit the ground running in the war within. This is going to be a beginner-friendly guide. However, for those veterans watching, I will be covering everything you need to know too. So let's jump straight in with our stat priority. Our main stat is intellect, meaning we want to get a higher and higher eye level of gear to get more and more intellect. That is going to increase the potency and damage we do with our spells. Now, the stat priority I have put on screen is the secondary priority that you do need to follow. However, as long as you get a higher eye level of gear, this doesn't matter as much as you'd think. What secondary stats do we have? Versatility. This increases the damage and healing done by X amount, more obviously, for the more versatility you have, and also decreases damage taken. So it's a really rounded out stat there. We have haste, increasing our casting speed and energy regeneration. So let's say I'm casting Starfire here. Well, the more haste I have, the quicker that I'm actually going to cast that spell, and the quicker that my things like my dots are going to do damage over. Our mastery is Astral Invocation, and this is different on every specialization. For us Balance Druids in the War Within, our nature spells deal more damage and an additional amount to any targets affected by our Sunfire spell. Our arcane spells deal more damage and an additional amount to anyone affected by our Moonfire spell. So we're really revolving our damage around the sun and the moon, and Moonfire and Sunfire are two dots or damage over time spells that we are going to have up on our targets at all time. I will be explaining this in full when we go through the rotation shortly. We've got Critical Strike, where we're going to have a chance to double our damage. Let's now look at the actual set bonus while we're here that we are going to get in the War Within Season 1. So our 2 set, our Star Surge damage is increased, and our Starfall damage is increased. 2 of our main rotational spells, again, that I'll be going through shortly. The 4 set is that our eclipses, our lunar and solar eclipse, each increase the damage of astral power. Increase the astral power Wrath generates, and Starfire generate by 2 and 5. Basically, in balance, we're going to be going into a lunar and solar eclipse depending on how many enemies we are fighting. And then astral power is one of the main resources we're going to be spending or dumping on high power abilities. And this is actually going to increase how often we can pretty much do that. Again, more on that in the rotation shortly if you are a beginner. So moving on to the utilities and kind of defensive spells that we have as a druid, I'm going to be showing you the most important ones now. That's not to say that there aren't other utilities available. There are quite a lot you have as a druid in your toolkit. However, as a beginner, I do not want to overload you, and these are really the ones you need to worry about. Once you're more comfortable with the specialization, I would just go through your spellbook and the druid talent tree, so that's the talent tree on the left, and just see the other bits and bobs that you do have available. So starting off with on the left, what we can do to our enemies to stop them, we've got Cyclone. Throwing our enemy up into the air, incapacitating them for a few seconds. That does mean that we can't attack them and they can't attack us. We've got Hibernate here, forcing our enemy to sleep for 40 seconds, but damage will awaken them. It does only work on beasts and dragonkin, so you need to kind of work out, who is my enemy here. We have Typhoon, one of my favorites. It's instant, so you can see I can use it on the move here on these target dummies. It's going to blast away your enemies, knocking them back, and also slowing them for a few seconds. Speaking of slows, we've got Ursul's Vortex here, and you can place this wherever you want. You can see here this vortex appears, and enemies inside it are going to be massively slowed. Now, when they try and exit it, they'll be pulled back into the center of the vortex when they first attempt to leave it. And lastly, we have Entangling Roots. You can see here, I'm going to entangle the target dummy in roots. Now, it sometimes will actually be interrupted by damage, but not always. Now on to the things we can do to improve our quality of life for us and our allies. We have Dash here, increasing your movement speed by 60% and immediately putting you into cat form. One thing I want to note is that when you do go into cat form, you will actually be increasing your movement speed by 30%. So going into Dash will add another 30%. Just to reiterate that, Dash is going to give you a 60% movement speed buff, for 10 seconds, but going into cat form will speed you a little bit anyway. We've got renewal, simply renewing 30% of your maximum health. We've got innovate, giving to you or a fellow healer. Unlimited mana, basically, for casting spells for 8 seconds. So when you cast healing spells for the next 8 seconds, it won't cost any mana at all. Then we've got Bark Skin, reducing damage taken while also increasing healing taken. Your skin is as tough as bark. And you can use it while stunned, feared, frozen, asleep, etc. And lastly, we have Mark of the Wild, increasing the versatility by 3% for you and any party or raid members. You can also use it on people in the wild. I could probably even use it on this NPC here. Let's see. No, it doesn't work. But you can use it on people just out in the wild. You can target them and then use it on them, and it will increase their versatility. Remember, that is the stat that increases damage and healing done and also decreases damage taken. So again, it will actually affect you, your party and raid members, or people that you target out in the open world. And that is it. The last one, as I said, go through your spellbook. The last one I want to mention is Rebirth. Usually you can only resurrect allies out of combat, but Rebirth will let you actually resurrect them on a 10-minute cooldown when you are in combat. So if somebody dies on a boss fight, you can actually just resurrect them there and then. Do be careful where you do this. You don't want to resurrect them into something, but this is a really, really useful utility that we have. And the cooldown is shared among the party. So if you have like a Death Knight, another Druid, or anyone else that has paladins that have, combat reses available, the cooldown is shared between you. Now for the actual fun part, which is the rotation. So what you can see here is 3 different bars. The top bar is kind of our opener and what I want you to start off with when you're going into the arena or battleground. The middle bar is kind of our general rotation and the things we're going to be using, at least these spells over here. And then the third bar is more of our utilities and defensives and how we're going to use them, including these 2 up here. For the hero talents, we are going with Elune's Chosen, and I'm going to talk you through that fully shortly after we look through the main abilities. So first things first, when you are going in, you're going to want to go into Prowl. It will actually automatically put you into cat form so that they can't see where you are and you can get a bit of a combat advantage. What you could then do is when you found them is use Cyclone, let's see, on this training dummy. You are going to come out of cat form and out of stealth. Obviously, the target dummy is also immune. So this is a terrible example. Tosses the enemy target into the air, disorients him, etc. You could pop out of stealth, pop this out, and then you really do have the element of surprise there. Then what we're going to do is just dot up all of our enemies with Sunfire and Moonfire. What these are going to do, they're both dots, so damage over time spells to just kind of nip away at your enemy's health and also generate Astral Power. Astral Power is this here, which we're going to be spending on Star Surge. This is one of the main ways we can really get some big burst damage out on our opponents. Once you've got your dots up, etc., we do want to go into our Eclipse. Because of the Elune's Chosen Eclipse, we are mainly going to be using a Lunar Eclipse. So you're going to cast 2 Wraths, and that's going to put you into, as you can see up here, a Lunar Eclipse. Arcane spells deal more damage. Starfire damage is increased, and Starfire deals increased damage to nearby enemies as well. When you come back out of that Eclipse, you're then going to want to do 2 Wraths again to get back into your Lunar Eclipse and start using Starfire. That will also generate Astral Power, which you're going to dump in Star Surge. At the same time, keep up these dots at all times. We are, of course, going to be in the Moonkin form, which is actually quite good for PvP. Shapeshift into Moonkin form, increasing the damage of your spells, and it gives you a lot of armor and gives you protection from polymorph effects. So if you're up against a mage in PvP for the War Within, you're actually going to have a bit of an advantage over them with trying to polymorph you. While we're on the subject, don't forget you can also go into bear form for some defensives as well. where you're going to get 220% increased armor and 25% extra stamina, being immune again from polymorph effects. And you may or may not know this, but when you actually go from one form to another, it will free you from any movement impairing effects, which is why Druid are just so annoying to come up against. Their arsenal is truly unmatched. When you are in bear form, we also have frenzied regeneration. You are going to need to generate a little bit of rage for this, which is the main resource you have in bear. Heals you for 32% of your health over 3 seconds and increases healing received. And then we've also got Iron Fur. That's going to cost 40 rage. Generally, I don't think you're going to have time to get enough rage to be really using this en masse, but it's good to know that we have it just in case you do. Increases your armor by a large amount for 7 seconds. Speaking of which, we also have Bark Skin, where you take 30% less damage, increases healing received, and also prevents damage from delaying any spell casts you have. And that can be used in any form, by the way, not just bear form. So if we're going to go in with some burst damage, what I would recommend is using your Incarnation Chosen of Elune, an improved form of Moonkin that grants the benefits of Celestial Alignment, more arcane damage and more crit chance, etc. Then we're going to immediately use Fury of Elune. It calls down a big beam of pure energy that follows the enemy, dealing damage to them, and generates a lot of astral power as well. Make sure we're keeping those dots up. Ideally, you would get your dots up before you go into this for your burst, so they're already ticking away. And then you can just smack out a load of Star Surges, spending that astral power. There is also Warrior of Elune cooldown. Your next 3 Starfires are instant cast and generate 40% increased astral power. So make sure you are in your Lunar Eclipse before you start doing this, so that you can just pound out your Fury of Elune. Your dots are already up, you're going to get your Star Surges out, and then boom, Warrior of Elune, we're already in our Lunar Eclipse, and we can get out some instant Starfires for a massive amount of burst damage. Looking at the other utilities we have at our disposal, we have Entangling Roots. Roots the target in place for 30 seconds. It does have a cast time, which is the only annoying thing. We have Mass Entanglement, which is instant. Roots the target and all enemies in place for 10 yards. For 10 seconds, and damage may interrupt the effect. Renewal is an instant heal for 30% of your health. We also have Regrowth, which is actually usable in Moonkin form and is a pretty hefty heal. If your healer is, incapacitated, etc., you can use this on yourself. For movement, we can use Dash to immediately go into cat form and speed up, whereas Stampeding Roar will actually enhance that for your entire party. For interrupts, we have Solar Beam, which is actually the best interrupt in the game, in my opinion. Summons a beam of solar light over an enemy target's location, interrupting the target and silencing all enemies within the beam, and it lasts 8 seconds. So it's not just a quick instant interrupt, it's like a whole duration one. And then lastly, we have Typhoon, where you can push them back and slow them down as well. The other things we have here is Heart of the Wild. This is actually going to enhance anything that is not a balanced spell. So Guardian, Bear Form gives you an additional 20% stamina. Restoration, healing is increased. So if you use Regrowth, the healing on Regrowth will be increased after you use Heart of the Wild, and things like that. So it's going to really enhance a few specific spells that you have. For the PvP talents that I think you should take, we have Moonkin Aura. Star Surge grants 2% spell critical strike chance to 8 allies within 40 yards for 18 seconds, and that can stack, adding some massive crit and burst potential for your allies. The second one is really interesting, Owlkin Adept. Owlkin Frenzy can stack to 2 times and reduces the cast time of your next Cyclone or Entangling Roots by 10%, further enhancing how quickly we can get out those Entangling Roots, etc., and actually stop our enemies in their tracks. The third one is kind of up to you. I would say these ones are the more mandatory ones. High Winds can be good, increases the range of Cyclone, Typhoon, and Entangling Roots, so you can get them out from further afield. Or Dying Stars, but it really depends on what your enemy's doing. If they dispel your Moonfire or Sunfire, they suffer 15% additional damage from their effects for 12 seconds. If already vulnerable, 50% of the remaining duration is applied to the Dispeller. I don't know really how much people would be dispelling those dots. It kind of depends on who you're up against. But if they are dispelling them, this can be a really fantastic talent to get back at them for that. Another good one is always Fawns. Sprouts Fawns for 12 seconds on the friendly target, and when the victim To melee attacks, Thorns deal nature damage back to the attacker, and their movement speed is also reduced. This is really good when you can use this and then dash out of the way, etc., slowing them, but also getting you out back to range really quickly. In this build, we are going to be going with the Elune's Chosen Hero talents, and this is available to both Balance and Guardian Druids. So if you are thinking of changing spec and still using it, you can. Starting off, we have Boundless Moonlight at the top. Fury of Elune now ends with a flash of energy blasting nearby enemies for astral damage. We also have Full Moon. New Moon and Half Moon cool down a Minor Moon, and Full Moon cools down 2 Minor Moons, dealing damage and generating astral power. Then we have on the left Moon Guardian, where our Moonfire and Starfire generate more astral power. Lunar Amplification, each non-arcane damaging ability you use, increases the damage of your next arcane damaging ability, and this can stack up to 3 times, so cycling arcane and non-arcane. Then we have a choice here for Stellar Command or Lunar Cooling. Starfire deals 65% increased damage to its primary target, but no longer triggers Eclipse. And Stellar Command, increasing the damage of Fury of Elune and the damage of Full Moon by 25%. In the middle, we've got a straight up increase to Moonfire damage. We've got enemies damaged by Full Moon or Fury of Elune take more damage from you. And then we have Astral Insight or Light of Elune. Light of Elune, Moonfire damage has a chance to cool down a Fury of Elune to follow your target. And Fury of Elune, it just explains what it does, generates astral power over its duration. Then Astral Insight, Incarnation Chosen of Elune, increases arcane damage from spells and abilities while active, increases the duration and number of spells cast by Convoke the Spirits by 25%. I love Convoke the Spirits, so I do love this talent. And then on the right, we have Bearform and Moonkin, reduce arcane damage taken, and all other magic damage taken as well. Another choice, Moondust, enemies affected by Moonfire are slowed, pretty niche on that one. And Elune's Grace, using Wild Charge while in Bearform or Moonkin, incurs a 3-second shorter cooldown. Unless you need to actually slow your enemies, I would just go for Elune's Grace on that one. Lunation and Arcane Affinity, all arcane damage is increased, and then arcane abilities reduce the cooldown of Fury of Elune and the cooldown of New Moon, Half Moon, and Full Moon. Lastly, we have the Eternal Moon, further increases the power of Boundless Moonlight, where your Fury of Elune now generates astral power and its damage is increased by 50%, and Full Moon, which is where New Moon and Half Moon now also cool down another Minor Moon. Lots of moons going on in the Elune's Chosen. It's not my favourite hero talents, but you know what? I don't think it's too bad either. There's definitely some good stuff in there. I wish, though, we had a little bit more utility in there. Because it's a new expansion, let's have a quick look over the new consumables and enchants, etc. that we will be using as well, as some things have changed. So, you can still get extra gem slots on your gear in the vault every week on the head, wrists and waist. And this is the Nerubian Gem Weaver. Apart from that, it's also changed how we add more sockets to our neck. Rather than being able to have up to 3 sockets on the neck, we can now have 2 slots on every single jewelry slot, which are magnificent jeweler settings. So 2 on your neck, 2 on your rings, each of your rings. So 2 on ring 1 and 2 on ring 2. For your cloak enchant, it's the Chant of Winged Grace. This gives you minus fall damage and also some avoidance as well. On the chest, it's Crystalline Radiance, which is simply going to increase your primary stat. And then we have on the wrist, the Chant of Armored Avoidance, again giving avoidance there. Sunset Spellthread on the legs, again increasing your primary stat. Scout's March is on the boots, increasing your movement speed, going for Cursed Haste on both rings, giving you more haste, and Authority of the Depths on your main weapon. When you are doing damage to your enemies with the Authority of the Depths enchant on your weapon, your damage has a chance to actually cause creeping shadow damage on your enemies, and it can deepen up to 3 times, meaning it will do more and more damage up to 3 times. For the actual consumables we're using, Flask of Tempered Mastery is generally the one I would say to go for. which is going to increase your mastery. Because of Elune's Chosen and how we're doing so much more astral damage, the mastery is going to work in really nicely with this. Feast of the Divine Day, that's just primary stats at intellect. And again, what the Tempered Potion does is really interesting. So you know how I said that Tempered Mastery is for mastery, and that's the flask we're going to use? Well, the Tempered Potion means that when you use it, it will massively increase any secondary stats that are not using a Tempered Flask. So if you are using the Tempered Flask of Mastery, then you're basically going to use your Tempered Potion and get crit and haste, etc. from that potion. Healing Potion, very obvious. Algari Mana Oil is really good on your weapon oil, which is going to increase your critical strike and also haste. Crystallized Augment Rune is this season's Augment Rune, increasing intellect. And then for the sockets, we can go for the Culminating Blasphemite. What this basically does is you use this as your epic gem, and you're allowed that, well, the more other color gems you have, the more effects you'll get from your Culminating Blasphemite. So if we use a Masterful Emerald, an Onyx, a Ruby, and a Sapphire, which all give different stats, it's actually going to increase individually the effect on our epic gem. And what this does is it gives us 15% critical effect per different colored gem. So if we've got 4 different colored gems on there, that's 0.6% more critical effect we will be getting. Whereas if you used all rubies, you'd only get 0.15% increased critical effect. Hopefully that makes sense. Thank you so much for watching this guide. I hope it was really useful for you in The War Within Season 1, whether it was for Mythic Plus or raiding. If you do have any questions, I'll be happy to help. My Patreon is in the description below, and that is where you can find my LVUI profiles, which I'll show you in a second. And also, I'm putting together a huge macro list for every single spec that's going to be really useful for you in The War Within as well. I am doing all classes and specs for The War Within, so if you are new to the channel, then please do click this playlist here to check out what else I have, which is all of them. There will also be PvP guides on this channel as well for War Within Season 1, so make sure to look out for that. This here is the UI that I was referring to. As you can see, we've got target frames, etc., left and right, and raid frames go in the middle here, and then weak auras in the middle with an action bar down here. Chat is behind where my camera is. Minimap and details, etc., are here on the right. All of the plater profiles, the voodoo, the LVUI, etc., details profile has all been made by me. And again, you can get this on my Patreon should you like it.